I'm going to read to begin for devotion from the second chapter of the prophet Habakkuk. Right? And if you can spell Habakkuk, then maybe you've read it. But if you cannot, you're just like me. So Habakkuk was in the 6th century BC and living in and among the people of Judah and Jerusalem. And they were being squeezed from powers on both sides. The Egyptian Empire was rising up to their west. The Babylonian Empire was rising up to their east. And in between, God's people were wondering if God would be faithful and protect them. And so Habakkuk is living in this relationship with God where he's expressing his anger and his fear at the beginning of this work to God directly on behalf of his people and calling on God's faithfulness going forward. And here is a word from that second chapter from the prophet Habakkuk, which actually is the Old Testament lesson on October 2nd when we have our Vision 2025 meeting and vote. The prophet writes, I will stand at my watchpost, and I will station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what God will say to me and what God will answer concerning my complaint. So then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that a runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come and it will not delay. I read that passage, that verse on write the vision on tablets, make it plain so that a runner may read it. And interpreters have interpreted that two different ways. One would be, is if it's so plain on a tablet that everyone can understand it, then even a runner running by will get it. Or, there were these people who were designed to be the runners, to take the vision to go out into the world and share it with others. Either one of those interpretations feels good and correct. What we are hoping to do today is give you this vision and make it plain and understandable, and that you would walk out from this room with a better understanding of where we're headed and be runners. Go out into the world, into the congregation, into the community, to share this so others will know and understand, and we will join together for what God has out ahead of us. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Thank you, God, that you give us vision. And we know that that's a collective vision because it's stronger with the input of everyone. So give us patience to listen well to each other, to gather in what stirs in each one of us so that you might build it in what you have for all of us. Thank you for the work done to date, for on our vision team and our church council. This wrestling has been across years. So be with us, guide us, as we have this conversation wrapped together in the truth and love of our Savior Jesus. Amen. So the first person I'll call on to present is one of our co-chairs of the Vision 2025 team. We were originally the Vision 2020 team, and then we became the Vision 21, 22. We're now the Vision 25 and beyond team. So, Katie Sieben, I'll call on to come forward and share with you.
Thank you. Let's see. Is it on? Can you hear me?
Needs a little more.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay.
Be close.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Sieben, honored to be up here this morning. Just a little bit about my background if we haven't met. I currently work with the Cargill Foundation, and there's a reason why I'm mentioning that, but very focused on the Twin Cities community and what the needs are in the community, and served in the state of Minnesota as a deed commissioner. So bring those perspectives to my work. My co-chair, Bill Evans, is helping his parents move into a new home this morning. But he will be with us in October. He serves in hospital administration, and crazy job, and brings great leadership as well. And we also have other members of the Vision team here. If you wouldn't mind just quick standing. Cameron, I see you. Mark, Allison, Hillary, and then we had a team of about 7 or 8 others. So it's just fantastic backgrounds of individuals in our congregation that are doing community work, that have been longtime members here. Also backgrounds in research and leading surveys. So as Pastor Paul said, we started this work a long time ago. The pandemic gave us a few surprises for our vision work. But we dove in by reviewing the last vision team's effort. What had they created for the church? Let's look at our history. Let's look at where we're coming from. And let's let that inform our vision to guide us forward. And we did broad outreach. We did all congregational surveys, asking for your feedback, and your input. What do you see as the vision for our congregation and what our mission will be? We led small focus groups. We did one-on-one discussions and outreach. We also interviewed staff. We talked with our preschool teachers. What are their needs? What do they see as the vision for the future? So we did all of this work. We thought we were getting a plan put in place, and then COVID hit. And I think actually, in a way, it was a blessing for this work, because it made us pause and try to figure out, where are we going? What does the future hold for us? And in the beginning of the pandemic, that was really unclear for all of us, right? What does that look like? But it did help us to see, where are there gaps in our resources? Where do we need to make more investments, such as in technology, in reaching our congregation in new and different ways through virtual programming or social media, in having an outdoor worship space that was safe for all during that pandemic, and still gave us that way to connect and worship together. So we were very thoughtful in our process. We were very intentional in the work that we did, and it was inspiring to sit around a table together and just share open thoughts, candid ideas on what's going well and what do we need to continue to think about and work on. So on behalf of the vision team, we fully endorse this plan. We're really excited about the future of our church and our congregation. And we think that this is kind of the next step we can all take, which really isn't much of a diversion from our foundation and our history, but what is that next chapter? So excited for the rest of the team to share more information with you today.
Thanks, Katie. Just a quick introduction. A large part of our All Together in One Place comprehensive campaign that concluded with 2015 was our work on our facility. Major investment across all of the spaces of the 64,000 square feet that we have. And Dean Newens, who's a member of our congregation and works in design for Opus, had a huge role in all of that work and outcome. We're very blessed to have him as part of our team still here today going forward. So if we've taken a look at Trinity Commons, we've immediately come to talk with Dean and to offer our joy in having them work alongside us and alongside his partner in work, Kevin Cunningham, they'll present with you now. So there you go, Dean. Keep it close.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dean Newens, as Pastor Paul said. I head up the architectural and engineering group of the Opus group of companies. And with me today is Kevin Cunningham, our design build project manager, who will be responsible with his team in executing the project when we get going on the project. So as we've talked about, there's been quite a bit that's been done here already, and some of this will be very familiar for you, and some will be new information if you're just joining us late here in the last year or so. But we've been working for quite a while on creating a vision for outside, and when you think about this space, it's really threefold. It is a place for outdoor worship that we've talked about, and this idea to really convert impervious parking lot into a gathering space and really a garden for all of us. Secondly, it's a place for our youth to gather and play, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then lastly, really a place to remember our loved ones. And so I'm just going to share the plans and some renderings that we've done for this, just to remind everybody that what we've created here that we're very excited about. And then when we get to Q&A, we can answer any questions you have about that work. So, looking for a button. I got it. So there are 3 areas that are a part of this project. This plan represents 2 of the areas. I'm going to go over here and work off of this plan here. So this is the south end of our campus. We're sitting just up here off page, and the street is over here, the highway is over here, and this is the back parking lot that runs down into to the end of our property. Currently, the parking lot circles in among itself and goes around and back this way. And what we're really doing is taking out all this asphalt and creating an outdoor worship space on the west end of the property. And then, so that's one area of improvement. The next place is the play area, which is, as many of you have seen, is quite, it's in need of repair. New playground equipment, safer, an accessible route for people that are disabled, and that was all happening and making that comprehensive, but connecting these two, but also define space for improvement. Here's a blow-up of the playground area, and just some visual images, some inspirational images of what we're trying to create for our youth. And you can see here, this is the accessible access to the project. Whereas also we're improving the water flow from the east end of the site down in through the project into the outdoor worship area, and just making just a wonderful, safe place for our youth. The other part of the youth improvement is just past that road that we just described, and this is actually for our, let's say, our older youth, our teens, to create an outdoor sport court here, and it really becomes a mixed-use space because it is designed to be overflow parking when we have large gatherings, but also for youth to have an outdoor play area, and that would be a safe area. There'll be some controlled place here so that we don't have cars conflicting with folks. The rest of the images that I'll share with you are really just some visual renderings that show you what's going on. This is the image that you saw on the cover page, and it's an aerial view looking to the northeast over this garden space that we've created. In the foreground is the new road realignment that takes us down to Wyman, and then allows us to create this green space. I want to give some props to David Clark, who actually came up with this concept. We were talking about ways to create a space that you could use in different ways, more shared space where the vehicle would still reroute through the project, but then we could close it off, much as I just described for the youth sport area. And he said, why don't we just run the road straight? And we're like, oh my goodness, this is actually a really strong idea. So we went to the city, worked with Public Works, and determined that it was viable. And really what it did is it created, I talked about impervious, this really creates green space now. So we're controlling watershed off of, rather than running off into the storm system, is actually allowing it to grow into the ground and feed the plants. So we're pretty excited about that. So good job, Dave. The next images that we're going to show here are really just coming from the north into the project and just crossing over, if you will, from the parking lot area to this space that we've created. And I'll just kind of go through these, and you see the bridge here. This garden area that the bridge is crossing over is actually, as I mentioned, carrying water from the east side of the site through the project and then into our stormwater area. The stormwater requirements now are much greater than they were when this facility was built 60 years ago. And so the 9 Mile watershed district is really has a great impact on how we solve for this requirement. This is the memorial wall that is designed to be a columbarium and a memorial wall for people to place names for their loved ones and or actually intern the ashes within the columbarium. These will be niches that are here that you can actually place the ashes in. And then what's wonderful about this is that it really gives us a place to reflect and to just be with our loved ones whenever we're using the space or any part of the day. Another aerial view looking over the overall space, you see the playground in the background. This is looking back north towards the space, and we're proposing We've considered having a little fire pit at this end of the project, and then this is the other end of that walkway, and then to the right there, we'd be walking up into the playground. And that's it. Thank you.
Our team has been working in a turbulent, changing time in our world. Not one of us would be able to say that we haven't walked into the deep recesses of our souls during this time, as so many things have been stirred up. And one of those is that, how do we relate to each other across the world today? Proximity is far closer than it's ever been, given all the ways we have the ability to connect in real time about what's going on all over the globe, which makes it so important that we do the kind of work that impacts the world every day. And so one of the branches of our vision is racial equity and reconciliation. How will we live in relationship to people different from who we are, yet in so many ways the same? All of us seeking to know that we're safe and loved in the world. So on behalf of the team, I want to call on Mark Worley to share some reflections on their work on the Racial Justice and Equity team. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul.
Yes.
Excited to be back with you again to talk about this important work. Little context. Been a member for like 35 years, a long, long time. I just want to say before I get into this, how much I love being a member of this congregation. And it's exactly for this reason, okay? Because of what's in front of us right here. I mean, I love the music, sermons are great, but it's the challenge.
No, but. and.
That's all really important, but it's the challenge that this congregation, leadership, staff, people that I see all around this room put in front of ourselves, particularly on a 5-year basis. Put things out there that we say, really? Okay, let's go for it, okay? So I'm excited to be a part of this. So also some context, I was on both the Vision 2025 group and through all of our trials and tribulations, and I'm also chairing the Racial Justice and Equity group, so a lot of involvement here. So excited to share this work, and in the context, the work of the Vision of the Racial Justice and Equity team in the context of Vision 2025. So my goal, I have 3 goals here for today. One is to understand how this came to be a priority within Vision 2025, what is meant by each of the areas, and what our team has been doing so far. And I also want to say, I assume that everyone here is supportive of this, but if you need more information or understanding to support this work, I hope that we can provide that today or as a follow-up, okay? It's a different subject, and I'll have something more to say about that in a minute. So first, why is this a priority? I would first point out that the heading here begins with mission and outreach. That's an area, and again, I've been here a long time. This has a very long history in this congregation. It's a priority, and another hat I wear is that those annoying surveys that you've had or focus groups you might have been, that's me, okay, to kind of do that for a living. And what you tell us is that it's one of the primary reasons why you're a member of this congregation. You say that this work is integral to your Lutheran faith and that you prioritize engagement within but also beyond our congregation. And let me just say, that's not typical of every congregation, okay? And believe me, that is why I say I love being a member of this congregation. So, and mission and outreach in Normandale is as much about educating ourselves on the issues of housing, hunger, healthcare, and being transformed by that learning and the people that we engage with, as much as it is the actual support that we provide, okay? And here again, that's sometimes different, okay? Sometimes there are groups and congregations that are simply there, we know it, we will tell you what to do, just follow the plan. We're there to learn, okay? So the idea of awareness and transformation is literally part of our spiritual expression. So, talk about our committee, during these long reflective discussions, and it was kind of surreal. It was months and months that we never met, in person. This was all online and kind of checking in and how are you doing through the pandemic and things like that. And then, oh, by the way, let's talk about a 5-year vision for our church, right? But anyway, so dimensions of this idea of awareness and transformation being part of the spiritual journey, they became themes in our discussions, and it was things like, what is our role as a congregation in racial justice and equity? So we had evidence of what was happening in our community, showed us that we didn't understand enough about our role in sustaining white advantage, the impact of that had on the communities that we are engaged with in mission and outreach. It began as discussion points within our group, but it kept coming up to the point where we had to explore what it would take to make it, what it would look like as part of the vision priority. Okay. I mentioned that education is a reason people worship here at Normandale, and in fact, education and mission and outreach follow slightly behind music in terms of priorities. We are nothing if not insatiably curious about our faith, about the world around us, about the weather, but that's a different subject. We crave learning from each other and from those around us in the wider community who have experienced or studied issues like the Bible, our Lutheran heritage, the music that plays such a big part of our worship. And we realized as a team that many in our congregation wanted to better understand this turmoil and pain in our community through the lens of our faith. And to use that understanding to make changes, to be part of a better tomorrow. Our team members who were part of it when the orchard came, and that was part of a vision from years ago, remembered that, so that was an investment in our biblical education. We brought in experts, studied and things like that. It was a remarkable journey. And it had a big impact, I think, on our faith and our worship life. And we decided that education and our racial biases and the impact that we have on our communities of color should become part of our vision priorities, along with internal assessment and community partnership to have an impact. So at the same time, we said, but you know what? This is a different subject, okay? We recognize that not everyone in the congregation might not be on the same page. Now, that wouldn't be the first time that that's happened in a vision process, right? But again, different kind of a subject here. Some would be hesitant, some would be skeptical, some maybe even opposed. So we emphasized that this would be a journey for all of us. And the education needed to come before action. Everyone needs to be welcomed into that education journey. So as I mentioned in my last presentation, this would be a journey of joy and optimism for creating positive change for a brighter future. And I can't emphasize that enough. So I hope the why is a little bit clearer, and I hope everyone feels welcomed into this learning and transformation journey. So what do we mean by each of these areas? So first of all, raise awareness and educate. Very simply, funds allocated, kind of the sort of obvious things, engaging speakers and facilitators, also providing materials, but then inviting cultural leaders to provide greater understanding through presentation. There was an event for the porch, which is fascinating for the group of people that did it. I wasn't able to be a part of it, where a person from the Native American community took the team members, took the porch members to important places in the Twin Cities to the Native American community. The burial mounds in St. Paul to the junction of the Mississippi and the Minnesota rivers down at Fort Snelling. And talking about the significance of these places as we understand through our lens, through the perspective of the Native American community. So imagine these kinds of opportunities that we could have, not just within the four walls of the church, but outside in the wider community. So things like grant contributions. We have funded in past people who wanted to go on into mission work, for example, based on experiences they've had here. So what about people who want to become champions for racial justice and equity? Maybe grants to help them in their studies. And then also, cannot forget this, can't emphasize it enough, continued support for our Justice Liaison, Julia Dinsmore. And if you've met her, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, this will be one of the highlights of your life, to meet her when it comes to this subject. She is remarkable that way. Just talk to people around the tables, which I'll introduce in a minute. Then we have seizing the moment, which this is always one of those kind of interesting places in a vision, which is, we don't know what it is. Well, what do you mean? We're allocating, $100,000 to this. Well, let's call that flexibility, options. We're going to make discoveries through this education process, through this transformation process. And there may be opportunities that we can't even define right now that present themselves, and we will have the funds available to take advantage of that and become involved. And then there's partnerships, which is being involved with community organizations, other congregations, other faith communities. And as I said, the intent is to work on education first, understand what the need is, what the opportunity is. And I'll talk about one community organization we're already involved with, but that's as much them being a strong part of our education process. And then finally, there's also mission and outreach, which is funding for our current ongoing programs in mission and outreach, the Center for Healing and Wholeness and Normandale Housing Ministry. Let's talk about what we've been doing. And before I do that, could I have the members of the Racial Justice and Equity team stand up and identify yourself? Great, thank you, thank you. So they're distributed around. Take note, ready and willing to answer questions, just as I am. So thank you. So it may seem odd, we already have this group going and the vision hasn't been approved yet. This group was authorized, asked to be formed by the Church Council earlier this year, and they asked us to actually begin working on these issues, okay? So, as I say, the challenge, it's an odd one. As I say, it's not like the Finance Committee, where the Finance Committee doesn't need to necessarily get around and decide, what are your perspectives on finance? What's your experience with finance? This subject requires trust, and in order to move forward effectively, one needs to have trust with the people that you're working with. And so a lot of our time was spent simply having conversations about our experiences with race. One of the questions we would ask on one-on-one conversations, tell me about your experience with race as a child. What did you grow up with? And then bring that forward to today. And it's remarkable. And I encourage you, just as a thought experiment, or with friends or relatives, ask that question. When did you ever have that conversation maybe with people? And it's quite revealing and very helpful, I think. So anyway, we've spent a lot of time doing that. We're working on a mission statement, and I think that's really important. As you can see, we didn't just jump right into that from the beginning. We said, let's start to learn about each other and understand this issue a little bit better. I mentioned that we have, last time, that we are not experts in this. Although we do have a couple of people, Julia Dinsmore, Olivia Maestri, who actually are experts in this area. So they're helping us a lot to understand and form some of our thinking. Our meetings are open, and we welcome participation from those who have other perspectives. We're getting those. We're getting enthusiastic support, and we're also getting challenges from people as well. So we have a lot of ideas for educational and facilitated experience. We're looking forward to making those available. You put that in the context of the porch, which was a weekly experience, kind of late afternoon. What we're saying is, let's continue the spirit of that, but make it accessible to the wider part of the congregation and inviting and welcoming to that too. So we're thinking creatively about that. We've spoken to other congregations. Westwood Lutheran Church has been involved in this for a long time, has had a lot of learning and frankly success. And so we're learning from other congregations through that. I mentioned last time in May, we've already voted to partner with the Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement. They are really working with us right now to guide us along on this journey. They've worked with 25 congregations who have been through this. The first step, our team and the church staff are participating in an assessment of our intercultural perspectives, both at an individual and an organizational level, and we're going to get guidance from them in terms of how we respond to that and developing our future plans. So let's see, and then the work is ongoing. To kind of sum this up, and thank you for the time to do this. The work is ongoing. The funding from Vision 2025 is going to help us accelerate this learning and the results. And again, I hope that most are supportive of the work. If you have questions, please let us know. We want to talk about this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. In June of this summer, we were delighted to welcome to our staff Brent Malcolm as our new business administrator. He comes with a great understanding of our congregation as a member for a long time, 6 years as our council treasurer. We couldn't have had a smoother transition in a role, so we're so grateful for Brent. He's going to share some reflections on where we sit with Vision 2025. Brent.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. So I have just a couple of goals to briefly profile to give context around the campaign. Financial goals, but also congregation, how we govern something like this, which matters. As many of you know, we have I'll call it a pretty strict process. Every year, we approve the annual budget for the church and the expenditures of the church. That's an annual event. Capital campaigns are separate, over and above the annual ministry that we approve every year. So that's why we are interpreting the capital campaign as requiring a congregational vote to solicit and raise funds, and then to offer up the intention that's similar to an annual budget. This is something we'd be talking about over the next 2, 3, 4 years about the funds and where they have gone, what has been raised, for example. So financial goals for the capital campaign and its major tenets of Trinity Commons, technology and communications, as Mark just spoke about, mission outreach with focus on racial equity, are the major elements of the campaign. The goal for the campaign would be $2.2 million. Just for context for all of you, our preceding capital campaigns, our one just prior to this was the most major for our congregation, ATOP, which was about $4.5 million. And then the capital campaign that preceded that, marching off the maps, was somewhat in excess of $2 million as well. The vision of this campaign has been gestating for some time. We do have in 2022 leading members of our congregation providing leading gifts and pledges. Just by way of an indication, before we've officially launched on the full breadth of the campaign, we have received either gifts or early pledges in excess of $800,000 toward this campaign, and have received gifts in hand out of that approaching $300,000 already as seed money, seed funding toward these purposes. The vision here is that we would have a congregational vote in 2 weeks to officially bless the launching of this campaign and the broader solicitation of gifts and pledges that would occur over the period of 2022 through 2025, where all these things would be undertaken. And probably the most timely aspect of it is not unlike our last campaign. It's the construction aspect of having funding in hand with a hope of undertaking Trinity Commons in 2023. Tuesday, Congregational Council will review, potentially edit this resolution, but this is essentially the yes/no vote of 2 weeks from now, which is to authorize, well, I'll just read it for you. Resolved that the leadership of Normandale Evangelical Lutheran Church be authorized to undertake the Vision 2025 capital campaign, including the solicitation of gifts and the planning of expenditures for the purpose of expanding the church's ministries with the Trinity Commons property improvement, with new investment in technology and communications capabilities, and with the expansion of the church's mission and outreach efforts, including a focus on racial equity and reconciliation. So that is intended to really just frame up the purposes of this capital campaign that is over and above and beyond the capacity of annual ministry that we approve every year at the church. So again, that verbiage, the job of council is to make sure that says it just right. So 2 weeks from now, but this will be shared with the congregation in advance of the congregational vote. So
thank you, Brent.
I'll give it back to you.
hope you can hear the strong hands and faithful hearts that are at the helm of this good work. I'm thankful for all of our leadership for bringing us to this point. We've contracted together till 11:45. We're approaching 11:30. I might ask that if you're willing to bump that to 11:50, so we get the fullness of our time together. If you do need to depart at any time, know that you're free to do that. I would like you now around the table to spend 5 minutes together with those you're seated with, perhaps to share something of the questions you have, right? So that not only that the whole room would hear questions from one, but that given any table circle, you might formulate some of the questions that you have, because that's a lot. You've received a lot in a short period of time, and if it's new, that's quite a bit to digest. So please, around your table, have a little conversation of what stirs, what challenges you see, what questions you have, and then I'll pull that back together with a full room conversation. If you're seated at a table with only two or one or whatever, I'd encourage you to move unless you just want to have a conversation with yourself. And that's love to hear the sound of the din in the room of the conversations going on, fast and furious, which indicates to me that there's a great deal of passion around the work we're about to embark upon. It's going to take all of us. So, because this is being recorded and posted online, I'm going to have to kind of stay where I am. You know, I normally like to walk around and move a little bit. But Brad Dahlman, a member of our church council, has the microphone in his hand. And if there's like kind of, a representative question that you believe has arisen, or if you want to ask 42 all at the same time, I'll answer them as quickly as I can. So raise a hand if you want to ask a question. Very good. Cameron has a question.
It's really a question representative of the table was, how are we in general in terms of the church and finances? In order to then put this above and beyond, just to say a few words around what is the current health of our church's finances.
Brent Malcolm.
Well, way to pass that one on.
Yep. I'll be outside.
Well, notwithstanding what Mark said, the Finance Committee, it's not that simple. I could go on for quite some time, but I guess I'd summarize it this way. The church is in good shape. We have reserves accumulated from prior years, prior giving. We have this strict budgeting process, and we are on budget. We're remarkably close to budget this year. I think I even joked about how could it be that close at the end of August. So giving and support is on pace to what council expected for the year. But that said, I think we're going eyes wide open into a capital campaign here, because post-COVID, we do need to kind of step back solidly onto stewardship, pledging, support of the annual ministry. So, assuming that this is approved, the stewardship type meetings, both from the pulpit and private meetings that will happen over October and November, is to serve both, to remind everyone about just the ongoing operations of the church and frankly what it takes to provide the programming and the support and the ministries that we do, and that this is over and above and beyond. But there's every indication that our congregation, when a purpose is clear, supports it very, very well. And so I guess I generally summarize, we are in good shape and stable. I do think post-COVID, it's hard to measure. Is our giving level through August, how's that compare to years pre-COVID? I do think it's retrenched a bit. We can't really explain how, but not materially, not nearly as much as what we hear from some other congregations. Thus, the need for a strong stewardship message here as we enter the fourth quarter of this year. So, hopefully that helps a little bit.
Thanks, Brent. One thing to add to that, too, is you've noted in our Vision 2025 Wing for Technology, we have allotted $700,000 across this time of the vision work. $300,000 of that is for the expansion of 2 full-time positions on our staff. One is for our Director of Audiovisual Ministry, Lauren Woltoff in the middle of the room. We can't do this. And the second one of those is our full-time manager of communications, to which we are going to afford $60,000 a year to supplement their compensation, right, across that time, knowing that this was a stretch expansion in our staffing coming up. So we're thankful for them. Be aware of that, though. However, we have yet to draw from any of our Vision 2025 dollars, so we're advancing the work prior to the approval. We'll look to meet that as we go along. Other questions? Mary?
So I'm completely in support of the 3 areas of ministry. And my question is, particularly with technology and racial equity, what kind of measures are we putting in place or metrics for how will we know that it's working, what our goals are in terms of what we hope to achieve, what measures are we using for success, because they're intangible.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's good to know some of how the budget was built, but what are we looking to see in terms of outcome? We can see buildings being built,
Yeah.
but you know, when more than half the budget for the campaign is spent on intangibles, and how will we make them more tangible so we'll know we're achieving a desired outcome?
Great question. Is Pastor Ian still sitting?
Right next to you.
He does this to me.
I thought I was the blind one.
Would you speak? Yeah, come on now. Pastor Ian's having eye surgery tomorrow, so say a prayer for him. Right? An important eye surgery.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to reflect something upon the intangibles of our technology and our practices that will meet the future church? He's our pastor of Next Generation Life, so I want him to speak.
Yeah, so it's a great question. With something like this that is a little more intangible, the few metrics that we have already, we know throughout COVID, from March of 2020 all the way through the time until, well, Lauren, you'll be able to see the statistics tonight of who's participating in our worship offerings, for example. So we know already that in our worship space on Sunday mornings, that we're getting close to kind of a pre-COVID Sunday morning in a service. We also know, though, that our average attendance online and throughout the week is making our overall numbers significantly higher. So our reach as a congregation is that much more. In fact, when we've had people joining our congregation, oftentimes it's not people walking in for the first time from the street and just saying, "Oh, I drove by your church and I wanted to see what it was about." It's often people who have been joining us online, some for years, some for months, some for one time, and they were sold. And so some of these things we will see some measurable pieces there. But I think the old assumption that like if you build it, they will come, isn't always true. We're having to find some creative ways to use technology, to use outreach, in our outreach efforts to get people connected. And so as we seek to continue to grow as a congregation, to have a larger reach, to do all the things that we know that we're really good at as a congregation, and continue to do those things. Some of these technologies are going to help us to reach out to people for whom belonging is going to come first before belief. Belonging is going to come before giving. Belonging is going to come before, and access to who we are is going to come before those things. So does that get at that question for you at all, Mary?
Partly, yeah. I put the same question to racial equity.
Yes.
Sure.
Sure. Great. What I will ask is this question. How many of you go onto your phone to look up restaurants in the area, to search through their websites, and then deep down into their menus, the hours that they're open, everything about that restaurant before you maybe make a choice about where you're going, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, so people do the very same thing with the church.
Mm-hmm.
First access is the presence of our website and our digital displays, our social media presence. And if it's true for me at my age, then look at all those who are coming after us, right? The power of our initial presence through media is essential to the first step into congregational life. It doesn't replace all the rest of the work. Then it becomes us, and it becomes about the relationships of welcome that we establish. So I'm just pointing that out a little bit. All right, Mark Worley's going to reflect on racial equity.
Briefly, and I would love to say, boy, here's a list of metrics if we're going to measure all of them on this subject. A couple of thoughts here. One, for sure, it would be the participation in educational events, and not just the physical participation. In other words, expanding this, again, I just said, making these available at times and days and places for more people to participate. And then on the other side of that, a sense from people, and you might see a survey on this, or be invited to a group or something like that, to have people, this is not, I was racist, I'm not racist anymore, but I have a greater awareness of the impact of myself, my congregation, on other communities, and what that has meant to people, and a sense that they're starting to change their actions because of that learning. That's the kind of thing I would look at. The other piece is CL&E, the Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement. They've been through this a number of times, and so as we're working with them, I'm going to be working with them to figure out some more measures of these as well. I think the congregation's where it's working.
Thanks, Mark. As we constantly work on cultural shift, we eventually feel it in our bones. Other questions?
Hi, our table was talking about a number of practical questions regarding the proposal. One was, does the budget include maintenance of the beautiful outdoor space? We are all thinking, how much is it going to take to maintain how beautiful it becomes, and taking care of the water and various other things. So we were curious if that was the maintenance of this outdoor space was part of the budget. Another question we had was the impact on parking. Some of us who've been here a long time remember when it seemed like all we were talking about was, do we have enough parking? We need to get more parking, and now we wondered what the net loss of parking spaces was going to be, and what your thoughts were to the impact on the congregation of that. And then finally, another practical question was about the capacity of the columbarium. 300 plus spaces, is that right? It actually, on the handout, it says 30 on one side and 300 on the other side. So I wasn't sure.
So 330.
It depends on how large the deceased are.
Too soon.
Too early.
We wondered what went into that estimate, how quickly anybody expected that capacity to be reached, etc., and was there a opportunity to perhaps expand that if needed? So some of those practical things.
Before I turn that over to Dean, I will say that maintenance part, and Brent and I will be talking about this as well. So at this point, he's purchased for me a walk-behind unpowered lawnmower, and I'll be taking care of that. But beyond that, I would like Brent to respond to what he sees in terms of the maintenance in regard to the property we're building out and how we'll manage that.
Yeah, I think it's probably safe to say that endowment for the maintenance is not part of the original funding under the capital campaign. I do believe maintaining that property and the remainder of our exterior is a part of our annual budget, which we do, it is a part of our budget every year already, and your point's accurate. I think it'll take a bit more to maintain exterior property that serves us all well. So that's where I see that coming in the future's annual ministry.
Thank you, Brett. I'll speak to the parking first. Here's what's kind of cool about this scheme is that we're only losing 19 cars in the entire plan. And if you think about, that seems like very little, and certainly on most days, we're not even using the south part of the parking lot in any great way. And of course, when we are at high season, there's overflow requirements, right? But it's not extensive. So we're pleased that we were able to design this in a way that it minimizes the impact on the vehicle and just maximize the opportunity to be outdoors together and worship. So that's great. The second thing, as far as the count on the columbarium, it's at or around 300 spaces. It's limited by the amount of real estate, if you will, or wall that we have. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure in the scheme was that it doesn't become a barrier in these spaces. So when I talked about the playground and the connectivity to the worship space, we studied very closely the sight lines between the two spaces to make sure that it felt like one, even though there are two functional spaces. So it's limited by the physical area that we have, and it is around 300 spaces. And as we refine things, we'll make sure we have that count. But those are the answer to your two questions.
Thank you.
If I believe the conversation we've had prior, we anticipate that we would have 2 spaces per niche.
Correct.
Most comps, so that, again, you can have 2 spaces for, or 2 deceased remains in each niche. For 6 niches. Yep, question over here. Daniel.
Two quick questions in regard to the Kennedy space. We talked about the sound equipment and requirements for doing outdoor services. And we were wondering if there would be a sound barrier between Highway 100 and this space. And secondly, whether the sound system would be part of the site or you would have to bring it in. And if it is part of the site, whether the amplification would be distributed throughout the area instead of having huge speakers that might broadcast to the entire neighborhood.
Great question.
So
Great
question.
Yeah.
So a couple things there. No barrier from 100, but what we've done in the design, if you saw that the space steps down. So we do have a sort of a physical move where sound would travel over to the extent it can. But there's a reality is we're near a highway. The other thing is that when it feels like it was last year, it might have been 3 years ago that we worshiped outside. COVID gap, I can't remember when it was, but when we were all together and we mocked up this space, I went with a decibel meter and went around the edge of the neighborhood and read how it was being projected out, because we've designed the space so that the sound projects towards 100 and not towards the neighborhood. If I'm answering your question, what I think is we've done a good job designing it to minimize the impact on the neighborhood and in some ways really enhancing the visual experience from the neighborhood to our campus. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and it's amplified. We do have power out there for amplification for the worships that we have out there.
Your question about moving in and out, it still remains to be determined. We're building a small platform area that's on the west side of the gathering space with a potential storage area beneath it that could be weatherproofed or whatever, but that's still, and for Lauren's back. We probably have time for one more question, really, at a table. Does anyone else have anything they wanted to throw out? Great questions. If you will, if there are any that remain that are powerfully stirring within you that you would want to write down and share with us as church council leadership, because we want to feel that we've strongly vetted the list of questions that you have, so as we prepare for the vote on October 2nd, everyone feels ready. So thankful for your presence here at the meeting. We look forward to more conversation. Pray for your leadership as we make decisions together to lead the people faithfully and with good stewardship. Go in peace and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.